All right, well, here we go. So, what we're going to be talking about today is, as you can see, we are going to be starting solving quadratic equations by factoring, okay? And for the next, I guess, week or so, probably 2 weeks, we're going to be focusing on this main part, solving quadratic equations, okay? And we're going to talk about a few different ways to do that. Today, we're starting with factoring. This is the first, I guess, method to solving these equations. And the reason I'm starting with factoring is because y'all should have been doing the factoring assignments the past couple days into last week, okay? So factoring should still kind of be fresh in your head, okay? So what I mean by solving quadratic equations is basically we are finding these points right here. We are finding the solutions. We're finding the x-intercepts, the roots, okay? The zeros. All of those are these two things right here. We're going to be finding those, okay, by using factoring, okay? But something to keep in mind, like a little note I'm going to put over here, is in these quadratic equations, okay, you can have, so it's possible to have two solutions, okay, like this graph right here. This graph has two solutions, right? Where it crosses the x-axis, it happens twice, okay? So it's possible to have two solutions, one solution, okay? So it could look like, it could be a quadratic that only touches the x-axis once, okay? So it's possible to have two solutions, one solution, or no solution, okay? All three of those are possible, and we're going to see examples of those throughout the week and so, okay? But today we're going to focus on kind of these easier ones that have two solutions, because that's mainly what you're going to see, okay? But just always keep this in mind, because you can have two, one, or none, okay? So let's get down to the steps, okay? There's always steps. So the good thing is that these steps are extremely similar to the steps we did last week, okay? So step one is I need to have my quadratic equation in standard form. So I need a standard form quadratic equation. Wait, that was terrible. That was bad. All right, here we go. So a standard form, I was writing too fast. A standard form quadratic equation equal to 0, okay? And that's a really important thing, okay? It has to be equal to 0 for this to work, okay? And we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll get to that stuff later, okay? So a standard form quadratic equation equal to 0. That's what we have. That's what we have to start with, okay? That's going to be step one. Step two is going to be, and these steps kind of just follow the factoring steps from last week, okay? So step two, remember we put the b term at the bottom of the x. Remember we draw the x to factor. So on bottom of my x, okay? Step three, we do a times c on top of the x. Step four, remember we find what goes in the boxes, so we find the factors. Okay, and I don't need to write all that stuff down because hopefully you should know that. Step five, remember we divide by a, and we'll go over this in a little bit. So we divide by a. Step six, we reduce. And then step seven, we write the factors. Okay, so all of this, you might not need to go through this step by step. You kind of it just makes sense by now. But if you need these steps, they're right here, okay? But now, to solve, we have one extra step at the bottom, okay? So the step at the bottom is we set each factor equal to 0 then solve. Okay? And that is basically the only difference between these steps and factoring steps. Okay, that's the only difference, is this very last step. Other than that, it's exactly the same. Okay? So, let's look at an example. Slide paper, here we go. Okay, so let's do number one. So number one, I have, give me my examples. I have x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Okay? You see how that's kind of different from the ones we've been looking at? Okay? And the reason is because now it's an equation, right? I have an equal sign. So this is now a quadratic equation that I can solve. Okay? So, if again, just like to solve it, we do the same steps to factor. So remember, the first steps that I did, like last week, is I need to find my A, my B, and my C, okay? I know this may seem like a lot, but I'm going to do it the first couple examples just so y'all remember, okay? So, my A, remember, that's whatever's in front of the x squared term, or the term to the second power, okay? So, if there's nothing in front of the x squared, remember, there's an imaginary 1. So my A value here is 1. That was bad. That's all right. There's a 1. Okay? Then we slide over. So my B value, remember, my B value is what's in front of just the x, right? So my B value is going to be -8. So I put a -8 right there. Okay? And then obviously C, constant, easy one. Boom, 15. Easy. Okay? So once I have all that, remember, we draw our x. Okay? So B goes on the bottom. So I'm going to put -8 down here. A times C goes on the top. So 1 times 15 gives me 15. Okay? And then on the sides, remember, I have over A, so over 1, over A, over 1. And then this is what I am looking for, okay? So far, it's exactly the same steps as last week. Nothing has changed so far, okay? So here, remember, to find what's in these two boxes, I need those two equations, okay? So let's start writing them out. So first equation, remember, f of x equals, remember, the equations are a times c over x. So first equation, a times c, 15. So 15 over x. Easy, right? Okay. G of x, just as easy to find. G of x, remember, that's a times c over x plus x, which gives me 15 over x plus x, okay? So, I have two equations. So once I have those two equations, we go to the calculator, which y'all should know how to find, and I always put the link on for y'all, so y'all can see it. So we go to the calculator, and we're going to type both equations. So 15 over x, okay? And remember, we hit the 3 dots, table of values. Let's do -15 to 15, okay? And we got that, right? So then I go back to the calculator button. I type in 15 over x plus x, 3 dots, table of values, and boom, okay? So now, hopefully you kind of remember, I need to look for, so let me write that down. So I need to look for my b value, which is -8. So I need to look for -8 in the g of x column, okay? So let's do that. So I'll go to my g of x. I'm looking for -8, and there it is, right? So I'll slide over, and I see that so let me write that down. So when g of x equals -8, x equals, where is it? -5. Yeah, x equals -5, and f of x equals -3. Pretty sure. Yeah, -3. Okay. So, hopefully you remember this from last week. Box this boy box that one, put them in here. So -5 goes here, -3 goes there, okay? So now we reduce, right? We simplify these two things. So -5 divided by 1 is just plain old -5. -3 divided by 1 is just plain old -3. Nothing fancy there, okay? So now that I have that, I can write my factors. So I'm going to write my factors are, so since this is a -5, so x minus 5. This is a -3, so x minus 3. Okay? So if this is what we were doing last week, we would be done. But there is this last step. Okay? So remember the last step. I wrote it down here. I'll bring it back. I need to set each factor equal to 0, then solve. Okay? So watch how I'm going to do that. I'm going to set both of these equal to 0. So when I set x minus 5 equal to 0, I'm saying x minus 5 equals 0. Okay? If I want to set this one equal to 0, I get x minus 3 equals 0. Okay? So now, both of these factors are set equal to 0. So what I need to do now is to solve for x. Okay? So I want to get x by itself. So on this left one, remember we draw our line to solve for x. Now how do I get x by itself, right? How do I get rid of this -5? What's the opposite of -5? Hopefully y'all would say +5. Okay? So here, on this left side, that turns into a 0 pair. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Okay? So that's a 0 pair. On the left, I bring down the x. 0 plus 5 is 5. Okay? So on the left side, I'm only left with x equals 5. Okay? That's one solution. So now I have to go to the right side to find the other one. So I draw my line. I want to know, how can I get rid of this -3, right? So what's the opposite of -3? +3. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So +3. Draw our line, right? -3 plus 3, 0 pair. I bring down my x, and I'm left with x equals, I forgot the equal over here, x equals 0 plus 3, 3. So I have x equals 3. Oh my, you can't even see that. My bad. There you go. Okay, that's the only thing that was there. So, these are my two solutions, okay? So my solutions are x equals 5 and x equals 3, okay? Those are my solutions. So my solutions are x equals 5 and x equals 3, okay? So those are the 2 points where this quadratic equation crosses the x-axis. It crosses it at 5 and it crosses it at 3, okay? So that's it. That's really it, okay? All this up here is what you did last week, all of this, right? The only new stuff is this little part, okay? That's it, okay? So let's try another example. Let's go to, I'm gonna skip this one. This is a better one. Okay. So I'm gonna go to this one. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, this is number 2. So number 2, we're gonna look at 2x squared plus 17x minus 9 equals 0, okay? So, right off the bat, it's in standard form, right? We have x squared and x and a constant, they're in order, and it equals 0, okay? So, since all of that checks out, we're good to start solving, right? To factor and then solve. So, first things first, A, B, and C. So, A, B, and C. Okay, so this should be easy by now, hopefully. A, what's in front of x squared? 2, right? B, what's in front of the plain old x? positive 17, we can just put 17. And then C, the constant, negative 9's in the back, so minus 9. Okay, ABC, easy. Easy as ABC. And now we draw our X. At the bottom of the X goes 17. At the top of the X goes A times C. So 2 times negative 9 gives me negative 18. Don't just put 18, okay? And then on the left and right, so I have both a fraction bar. Remember, I have the boxes on top. On the bottom, I have A. So I'm going to put a 2 here and a 2 here, okay? Okay? So now that we have this all filled out, I can find my two equations, so I can find what goes in the X, okay? So the first equation, right, f of x. So f of x equals, remember, a times c over x. So a times c is right here. So I just plug that in. So I get negative 18 over x. Okay? Then I find my second equation, which is g of x, which is just the same thing, except I add the plus x. So then I get negative 18 over x plus x. Easy. Okay? So now I go to my calculator. Let me kind of reset it over. So in my calculator, I type in the first one. So negative 18 over x. Hit the 3 dots. Table of values. We'll do negative 15 again. That works. Okay. That one's good. Hit the calculator. Do the same thing. Negative 18 over x plus x. 3 dots. Table of values. And we're good to go. Okay? So, now again, I know it's kind of repetitive. We need to look for the b value. So I need to look for 17 in the g of x column. So I go to g of x, and we're scroll until I find 17. Okay? So 17, I care about these two values, right? So when g of x equals 17, x equals negative 1, and f of x equals 18. Okay? So, just like we've been doing, boom, negative 1, boom, 18. So I'm going to go put negative 1 up here, put 18 up here. Okay? Now, we got to do some reducing and dividing and all that good stuff. Okay? So, can I reduce negative 1 over 2? No, it just stays as a fraction. It just stays as negative 1 over 2, negative 1/2. That's fine, okay? On the right side, I have 18 over 2. Can I reduce that? You should say yes, right? 18 divided by 2, that gives me 9, okay? So, I have these two. Now I can put them into factor form. So let me slide down a little bit. There we go. So, I'm going to write down my factors. So, my factors are, so remember I have x minus 1 over 2, x plus 9, okay? But now, hopefully, if y'all were in class, y'all would say, wait, that's not right. I told y'all about this last week. You cannot have that. So, hopefully y'all remember, what you need to do is you take the denominator and bring it to the front, okay? This one's fine. We don't got to do anything with this one. Just this we have to flip, okay? So my proper factors are going to be 2x minus 1 and x plus 9. That one's fine, okay? Those are my proper factors, okay? So again, if this were last week, we would be done here. But we have to solve. I want the solutions. So the next step, I need to set both of these equal to 0. So let's do that. So this left one, 2x minus 1 equals 0. The right one, x plus 9 equals 0. Okay? So let's start on this left one. Okay? So we draw our line. And now, I want the x by itself. So this one has a couple things happening to the x. What looks like the easiest thing to get rid of on the left side? Okay, so I have 2x minus 1. So in your head, we've done these a good amount of times at the beginning of the year. What I need to get rid of is this minus 1. So how do we get rid of minus 1? We add 1 to both sides, right? Okay, so we draw our line. Minus 1 plus 1 cancels out. Those give me a 0 pair. So on the left side, I'm left with 2x equals 1. Okay? So now, I want the x by itself. What is happening to the 2 and the x here? If I have 2x, if I have two numbers right beside touching each other, that means they're being multiplied. So to undo that, to do the opposite of that, I have to divide. So I'm going to divide by 2 on the left, divide by 2 on the right, okay? So on the left side, this, remember, leaves me with a value of 1, okay? Remember, when we divide by the number, it gives us with 1. So I have 1x on the left side. That's what we want, right? I have 1x. On the right side, I have 1 over 2. I can't reduce that or simplify it, so I just leave it as 1 over 2. And that's a perfectly good answer, even though it's a fraction. It's fine. It works. It's the right answer. So I have x equals 1/2 over here, okay? On the right side, I have x plus 9 equals 0, okay? So what I need to do here is, again, how do I get the x by itself? So if I have plus 9, I want to do the opposite. So I'm going to draw my line. And to get rid of the plus 9, we subtract 9. Draw the line, right? Plus 9 minus 9, 0 pair. I bring down the x. X equals 0 minus 9, -9. Okay? Now, do I have to divide anything here? No, because I already have 1x. I already have x equals something. So I just write my answer as x equals -9. Okay? And then that's it. So I can say my solutions are, so it's right here. Oh, can you see that? Yeah, you can. Sweet. So solutions are x equals 1/2 and x equals -9, right? I have two solutions. This one also has two solutions, okay? So that's all for this video. On the next video, I'm going to show you, we're going to have more examples where you're going to have, where we're going to have one solution and where we're going to have no solutions, okay? So I'll show you how those are going to look, and you should have an assignment soon. Maybe not tomorrow, but the day after, okay? So y'all have a good day, and make sure you keep up with your assignments, and if you need anything, just let me know.